The emergency bay of Nexus Medical Station hummed with the cold efficiency of advanced alien technology. Crystalline displays flickered with vital signs from across the galaxy, while automated surgical drones hovered in sterile suspension pods. The station served as a neutral medical facility at the crossroads of 3-star systems, treating everyone from wealthy merchants to the most destitute refugees. Mira adjusted her nurse's uniform with scaled hands that trembled slightly from exhaustion. Her dragon heritage showed in the subtle iridescent shimmer of her skin and the gentle glow of her amber eyes, features that had made her an outcast among both pure dragons and other species. For 3 years, she had worked double shifts in the station's lower levels, caring for patients others deemed unworthy of attention. Nurse Mira, the sharp voice of Dr. Zephyr cut through the medical bay's ambient noise like a plasma cutter. The Zentorian physician stood nearly 8 feet tall, his pale blue skin marked with the ritual scars of his noble caste. His forearms moved with practiced precision as he reviewed patient charts on his holographic display. The vagrant in bed 7 is complaining of pain again. Surely even someone with your limited medical training can administer a basic sedative. Mira's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. Dr. Zephyr, I've already given him the maximum safe dose. Perhaps we could run additional scans to... Additional scans? Dr. Zephyr's laugh was like breaking glass. For a human derelict? Do you have any idea how much each diagnostic costs? The station's resources are for paying patients, not charity cases. His eyes glowed with contempt as he gestured toward the lower ward. This is exactly why your species makes poor medical professionals. Too much emotion, not enough logic. The other medical staff, orderlies, technicians, and junior doctors, paused in their work, watching the familiar scene unfold. Some looked uncomfortable, but none dared challenge the senior physician. Dr. Zephyr's family held significant political influence in the Zentorian Medical Consortium, and his recommendations could make or break careers. A proximity alarm suddenly blared through the station, followed by the automated voice, "Emergency transport approaching. Prepare for immediate trauma intake." Through the transparent aluminum viewing ports, Mira could see a small, battered transport ship limping toward the docking bay. Its hull bore scorch marks from what looked like a firefight, and one engine was venting plasma in dangerous spurts. The ship's identification transponder was either damaged or deliberately disabled. "Probably more refugees," Dr. Zephyr muttered, his 4 hands moving dismissively. "I suppose we'll have to waste more resources on..." The transport ship shuddered as it made contact with the docking clamps. Emergency seals hissed into place, and the airlock cycled open. 2 human smugglers, rough-looking spacers with plasma burns on their clothes, carried in an unconscious figure on a makeshift stretcher. "Please!" one of the smugglers gasped, his face pale with fear. "He's dying! We found him floating in an escape pod near the Vorthan Nebula. His life support was failing." Mira rushed forward, her medical training overriding everything else. The patient was a human male, perhaps in his 40s, with graying hair and weathered features. His simple clothes, a worn work shirt and utility pants, suggested he was a laborer or technician. But something about his bearing, even unconscious, spoke of quiet strength. Multiple plasma burns, severe dehydration, possible internal hemorrhaging, Mira quickly assessed, her enhanced senses picking up details others might miss. "We need to get him to emergency surgery immediately." Dr. Zephyr approached with obvious reluctance, his scanner already passing over the patient with mechanical indifference. "Another human vagrant," he pronounced with disgust. "Look at these clothes. He's probably a failed colonist or escaped indentured servant. His neural patterns show significant stress trauma, not worth the expense of major surgery." "Doctor, his injuries are life-threatening," Mira pressed, her amber eyes beginning to glow with inner fire. "We took an oath to preserve life, regardless of..." "Do not lecture me about medical ethics, half-breed." Dr. Zephyr's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. The slur hung in the air like poison. "Your dragon blood may give you enhanced healing abilities, but it also clouds your judgment with primitive emotional responses. This human will likely die regardless of treatment. I will not authorize expensive procedures for a homeless vagrant." The unconscious patient stirred slightly, his lips moving as if trying to speak. Mira leaned closer, her sensitive hearing catching words others couldn't. "The children must protect the outer colonies." Something in those whispered words sent a chill down Mira's spine. This was no ordinary refugee. "I will not let him die on my watch," Mira declared, her voice carrying a resonance that seemed to vibrate through the metal bulkheads of the medical bay. The amber glow in her eyes intensified, and several nearby medical instruments began to hum in sympathetic response to the draconic energy building within her. Dr. Zephyr's four arms crossed in a gesture of absolute authority. "How you forget your place, nurse? I am the chief medical officer of this facility. My decision is final." He turned to address the other staff members who had gathered to watch the confrontation. "Let this be a lesson to all of you. Emotional attachment to patients leads to poor medical judgment. We cannot save everyone, nor should we try." The unconscious human's breathing became more labored, and his skin took on an alarming grayish pallor. The portable medical scanner in Mira's hands began beeping frantically. His life signs were failing rapidly. "His cellular structure is breaking down," Mira reported, her voice tight with urgency. "The plasma burns have caused systemic toxicity. Without immediate intervention, he'll be gone within the hour." Dr. Zephyr glanced at the readings with practiced indifference. "Then we make him comfortable. Administrative Protocol 7 Alpha. Palliative care for terminal indigent patients. No extraordinary measures." But Mira was no longer listening to the Zentorian physician. Something deep within her dragon heritage was stirring, an ancient instinct that recognized nobility of spirit, regardless of outward appearance. This human carried himself with the bearing of someone who had shouldered great responsibility, even in unconsciousness. The way his hands were positioned, the slight calluses that spoke of honest work, the old scars that suggested a history of protecting others. "I'm taking him to Surgical Bay 3, Mira announced, already beginning to move the patient's gurney. "You will do no such thing." Dr. Zephyr's voice reached a pitch that made several junior staff members flinch. "I am ordering you to stand down, Nurse Mira. Any unauthorized treatment could result in your immediate termination and criminal charges for medical malpractice." Mira paused, her scaled hands gripping the gurney's rails. Around them, the medical bay had gone silent except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Every eye was on her, waiting to see if she would submit to authority or follow her conscience. "Then, terminate me," she said quietly, her words carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "But I will not watch a good man die because of bureaucratic cruelty." The two smugglers who had brought the patient in exchanged glances of amazement. They had expected the typical indifferent treatment most medical facilities gave to refugees and vagrants. Instead, they were witnessing something extraordinary, a medical professional willing to sacrifice her career for a stranger. "You half-breed fool," Dr. Zephyr snarled, his pale blue skin flushing darker with rage. "Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Your position here, your medical license, your future? For what? Some worthless human who will probably die anyway?" Mira began pushing the gurney toward the surgical bay, her movements deliberate and unstoppable. "His worth isn't determined by his clothes or his social status, Doctor. Every life has value, something my dragon ancestors understood better than your advanced civilization apparently does." As she passed Dr. Zephyr, he grabbed her arm with one of his four hands. "I am placing you under administrative detention. Security will escort you to—" The moment his hand made contact with Mira's arm, something unexpected happened. A warm, golden energy began to flow from her dragon heritage, and through their physical connection, Dr. Zephyr suddenly felt a flood of images and emotions that weren't his own. He saw flashes of the unconscious patient's recent memories, a man standing on the bridge of a vast starship, making impossible decisions about the fate of entire worlds, the weight of billions of lives resting on his shoulders, the loneliness of command, the sacrifices made in the name of protecting the innocent, and then the desperate escape from assassins, the crash landing, the choice to travel incognito to personally investigate conditions in the outer territories. Dr. Zephyr jerked his hand back as if burned, his forearms trembling. What did you just— "Sometimes the dragon's sight shows us truth," Mira said softly, continuing to push the gurney. "This man has carried burdens you cannot imagine, Doctor. He has made decisions that saved countless lives, and now he lies dying while we argue about the cost of medical supplies." The unconscious patient's lips moved again, and this time his words were clearer. "The treaty must be signed. Peace depends on it." Several staff members looked at each other with growing unease. These were not the words of a vagrant or failed colonist. There was something about the patient, a quality of leadership that seemed to radiate from him even in his unconscious state. Surgical Bay 3 hummed to life as Mira activated the emergency protocols. The room's advanced medical systems responded to her touch, scanners descending from the ceiling, while robotic surgical arms extended from their housings. Despite Dr. Zephyr's threats, none of the other staff had tried to physically stop her. Something in her determined demeanor warned them that this was a battle they didn't want to fight. Initiating full body scan, Mira announced to the empty room, her hands dancing across the holographic controls with surprising expertise. The unconscious patient lay still on the surgical table, his breathing shallow and irregular. The scanner's blue light swept over him methodically, revealing the true extent of his injuries. What Mira saw on the display made her gasp. The plasma burns were worse than she had initially assessed. The energy weapons had caused cellular damage that was spreading through his system like a slow poison. But more disturbing were the older scars she could now see clearly, precise surgical marks that spoke of previous assassination attempts, evidence of a life lived under constant threat. "By the ancient flames," she whispered, her dragon heritage allowing her to read patterns in the scarring that others would miss. "Someone has tried to kill you many times, haven't they?" The surgical bay doors burst open, and Dr. Zephyr strode in with 2 security officers flanking him. The Zentorian's forearms gestured dramatically as he pointed at Mira. "Officers, arrest this nurse immediately. She is performing unauthorized medical procedures in direct violation of my orders." The security officers, both members of the insectoid klaxon species, hesitated. They had worked with Mira for years and knew her to be one of the most dedicated medical professionals on the station. Their compound eyes shifted uncertainly between the enraged doctor and the determined nurse. "Doctor." "Zephyr?" The senior officer clicked in the translated common tongue. "Perhaps we should wait for the medical review board to—" "There is no time for bureaucracy." Dr. Zephyr's voice reached a fever pitch. "Every moment you delay enforcement of station protocol undermines the entire chain of medical authority." Mira ignored the commotion behind her, focusing entirely on the patient. The cellular regeneration chamber was warming up, but she could see that conventional treatment wouldn't be enough. The plasma poisoning was too advanced, spreading too quickly through his system. There was only one option left, one that would reveal the full extent of her dragon heritage, and likely end any hope she had of continuing her medical career. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the unconscious patient, "but you're worth the risk." Placing her scaled hands directly on the worst of the plasma burns, Mira began to channel the ancient healing fire that flowed through her dragon bloodline. Golden light erupted from her palms, wrapping around the patient in ribbons of warm energy. The healing flame was not destructive like dragonfire used in battle. It was the primordial force of life itself, capable of reversing cellular damage and purging toxins from living tissue. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The patient's grayish skin began to regain its natural color, and his labored breathing eased into a more natural rhythm. The plasma burns that had been eating away at his flesh began to close, leaving behind only faint scars that would fade in time. But the display of draconic power sent shockwaves through everyone present. The security officers stumbled backward, their training warring with their instinct to flee from a dragon's magic. Even Dr. Zephyr, for all his arrogance, fell silent as he witnessed something that existed beyond the realm of standard medical science. "Impossible," he breathed, his forearms dropping to his sides. "Dragon healing is a myth, a legend from the old stories." Mira's entire body was now surrounded by the golden healing aura, her amber eyes blazing like twin suns. The dragon heritage she had spent years hiding was fully manifest, revealing her true nature to everyone in the room. She was no mere hybrid. She carried the bloodline of the ancient keeper dragons, the legendary healers who had once served as guardians to the greatest leaders of the galaxy. "The legends are real, Doctor," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond normal hearing. "My ancestors bonded with the noble houses of 100 worlds, dedicating their lives to protecting those who would protect others." The patient's eyes suddenly fluttered open, and for the first time since his arrival, he was conscious and aware. His gaze focused on Mira's face, taking in her glowing eyes and the dragon fire that still danced around her hands. "A keeper dragon," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder and recognition. "I thought your kind were extinct." Mira felt her heart skip a beat. This was no ordinary refugee. He knew the ancient titles, understood what he was seeing. Only someone with extensive knowledge of galactic history would recognize a keeper dragon's healing flame. "Who are you?" she asked softly, though something deep in her dragon instincts already knew the answer would change everything. The patient tried to sit up, wincing slightly despite the healing she had provided. His eyes never left her face, and in them she saw the weight of enormous responsibility, the loneliness of supreme command, and the gratitude of someone who had been saved by an act of selfless courage. "My name," he said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to fill the surgical bay despite its soft tone, "is Lysander." The name hung in the air like a physical presence. Lysander, even Dr. Zephyr, for all his arrogance and political connections, felt his 4 knees buckle slightly as the implications crashed over him like a tidal wave. There was only one Lysander whose name carried such weight across the galaxy. "Emperor Lysander," one of the security officers whispered, his compound eyes widening in disbelief. "The Supreme Commander of the Galactic Federation?" The patient, the Emperor, attempted to sit up fully, his movement still careful, but gaining strength with each passing moment. The golden healing energy from Mira's dragon fire continued to work through his system, repairing damage at the cellular level and restoring vitality that had been nearly extinguished. "Please," Lysander said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded the loyalty of 1,000 worlds. "There's no need for titles here. I came to this station because I needed to see firsthand how our medical facilities treat the most vulnerable members of society." His eyes found Dr. Zephyr's shocked expression. "I wanted to understand if the reports I'd been receiving about discrimination and inadequate care were accurate." Dr. Zephyr's pale blue skin had gone nearly white. His forearms trembled as he processed the magnitude of his mistake. He had not merely refused treatment to a vagrant, he had condemned the Supreme Emperor of the Galactic Federation to death through medical neglect. The political and legal ramifications were staggering. "Your Majesty," Dr. Zephyr stammered, dropping to his knees in the traditional Zentorian gesture of submission. I had no idea. Please forgive my—" "Rise, Doctor," Lysander commanded, though his tone carried disappointment rather than anger. "So your behavior toward me is secondary to your treatment of Nurse Mira and every other patient you've deemed unworthy of your care." Mira felt overwhelmed by the revelation. The dragon instincts that had recognized nobility in the unconscious patient now made perfect sense. Her bloodline had evolved to serve and protect the greatest leaders of the galaxy, and those ancient genetic memories had responded to Lysander's presence even when his identity was hidden. "You risked everything to save me," Lysander continued, his gaze returning to Mira with deep respect. "Your career, your freedom, possibly your life. Why?" "Because it was right," Mira replied simply, the golden aura around her slowly fading as the healing process completed. "Your identity doesn't matter. You were a person in need, and I had the ability to help. That's all any healer needs to know." The Emperor's expression softened, and those who knew him well would have recognized the look he wore when he encountered something that restored his faith in the essential goodness of sentient beings. Spoken like a true keeper dragon, "Your ancestors would be proud." Dr. Zephyr, still kneeling, looked up with desperate eyes. "Your Majesty, please understand, I was simply following established protocols for resource allocation. The station operates on a strict budget, and we must prioritize—" "You prioritize profit over compassion," Lysander interrupted, his voice hardening. "You judge the worth of a life by the clothes on their back and the credits in their account. Tell me, Doctor, what does your medical oath say about such distinctions?" The Zentorian physician opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to find words that could justify his actions. Around them, the other medical staff watched in stunned silence as their chief administrator was called to account by the most powerful individual in known space. "I've been traveling incognito through the outer territories for 6 months, Lysander explained, his attention shifting to include everyone present. "I've seen incredible acts of heroism and compassion from people who have very little to give. I've also witnessed cruelty and indifference from those who have been entrusted with great responsibility." His eyes returned to Dr. Zephyr. "Your behavior falls squarely into the latter category." Mira stepped forward, her medical training reasserting itself despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Your Majesty, you should rest. The healing process I used was intensive, and your body needs time to fully integrate the cellular repairs." "In a moment," Lysander replied, then addressed the security officers. "I want a complete investigation of this facility's patient treatment protocols, every case of denied care, every instance of discrimination based on species, economic status, or social position. The results are to be forwarded directly to my personal staff within 48 hours. The senior security officer saluted crisply. "It will be done, Your Majesty." "Furthermore," the Emperor continued, Nurse Mira is to be given full access to any medical resources she deems necessary for patient care. Her judgment in medical matters clearly exceeds that of the current chief administrator. Dr. Zephyr's face contorted with a mixture of humiliation and growing rage. His career, his reputation, his family's political standing, everything was crumbling around him because of what he saw as a single moment of bad luck. If only the Emperor had arrived in proper state regalia, none of this would have happened. "Your Majesty," Dr. Zephyr said, his voice taking on a tone of barely controlled desperation, "surely you understand that without proper identification protocols, any medical facility would have what?" Lysander's voice carried the steel of absolute authority. "Would have let me die? Would have ignored their fundamental duty to preserve life? Is that the defense you're offering?" The Emperor stood slowly, his full recovery now evident in the steadiness of his movements. Despite his simple clothing, his bearing commanded the room in a way that no amount of ornate regalia could have achieved. "I've heard enough," he declared. "Dr. Zephyr, you are hereby relieved of your position as Chief Medical Officer, effective immediately." The words hit Dr. Zephyr like a physical blow. His forearms clutched at the air as if trying to grasp something solid in a world that had suddenly turned upside down. The chief medical position he had held for 7 years, the prestige that came with his family name, the power to control life and death decisions, all of it was gone in an instant. "No," he whispered, then louder. "No, you cannot do this based on a single incident. I have served this station faithfully. My family has contributed enormous resources to medical research. My credentials are impeccable." Emperor Lysander's expression remained impassive, but those who knew him could see the controlled fury burning behind his eyes. "A single incident. Doctor, this was attempted murder through medical negligence. You sentenced me to death not out of medical necessity, but out of prejudice and arrogance." "But you're alive," Dr. Zephyr protested, gesturing wildly with all 4 arms. "The treatment was successful. No harm was actually done." "No harm?" Mira stepped forward, her amber eyes beginning to glow again with suppressed dragon fire. "What about all the other patients you've condemned with your resource allocation protocols? How many have died because you deemed them unworthy of care?" The accusation hung in the air like an indictment. Several of the medical staff exchanged uncomfortable glances, remembering cases where Dr. Zephyr had refused expensive treatments for patients who couldn't pay, or had delayed emergency procedures for refugees and outcasts. Dr. Zephyr's pale blue skin flushed darker as his rage built. The careful political mask he usually wore was cracking, revealing the entitled aristocrat beneath. "You dare question my medical decisions? I graduated top of my class from the Zentorian Medical Academy. I have published dozens of research papers. My family's donations have funded entire wings of major hospitals. Your credentials mean nothing if you lack basic compassion," Emperor Lysander replied coldly. Her true healer sees the value in every life, regardless of their ability to pay or their social status. The former chief medical officer looked around the room desperately, seeking support from his staff. But where he had once commanded through fear and political influence, he now found only uncomfortable silence. The other doctors and nurses had witnessed his humiliation of Mira, his callous dismissal of the vagrant patient, and his complete lack of medical ethics. "This is persecution!" Dr. Zephyr shouted, his voice echoing off the surgical bay's walls. "You're destroying my career to make an example of me. This is political theater, nothing more." "Your career destroyed itself the moment you forgot why you became a doctor," Mira said quietly. Her words carried more weight than any imperial decree because they came from someone who had sacrificed everything to uphold the true spirit of medical practice. "Doctor." Zephyr's 4 eyes fixed on her with naked hatred. "This is all your fault, half-breed. If you had simply followed orders, none of this would have happened. You seduced the Emperor with your dragon magic, manipulated him into—" The accusation was cut short as a wave of imperial authority filled the room. Emperor Lysander stepped forward, and despite his simple clothes and recently healed injuries, he radiated a power that made the air itself seem heavy with consequence. "Choose your next words very carefully, Doctor," the Emperor said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than any shout. "Nurse Mira saved my life through selfless courage and extraordinary medical skill. Any insult directed at her is an insult directed at the crown itself." But Dr. Zephyr had passed beyond rational thought. Years of unchallenged authority, generations of family privilege, and the shock of his sudden downfall had combined to shatter his remaining composure. Medical skill? She's a freak of nature, a genetic aberration. Her dragon blood makes her unstable, emotional, unfit for... The slap came so fast that even Mira's enhanced reflexes barely tracked it. Emperor Lysander's hand connected with Dr. Zephyr's face with a sharp crack that silenced the entire room. The Zentorian staggered backward, his hand rising to touch the mark that was already beginning to swell. "You will address Nurse Mira with the respect due to a hero of the Federation," the Emperor declared, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "She risked her career and freedom to save a life when you would have let that life expire out of prejudice. She embodies everything that medical practice should aspire to be." Dr. Zephyr stared at the Emperor with shocked disbelief, his hand still pressed to his stinging cheek. The physical assault had finally broken through his rage, replacing it with a cold realization of just how completely he had destroyed himself. "Furthermore," the Emperor continued, "you are hereby banned from practicing medicine within Federation space. Your medical license is revoked permanently, and you will face formal charges of criminal negligence and attempted murder through medical malpractice." The room fell silent, except for the soft humming of medical equipment. Dr. Zephyr's 4 arms dropped to his sides as the full weight of his sentence sank in. Not only was his career over, but his very freedom was now in jeopardy. "Escort the former doctor to security detention," the Emperor ordered the Klaxon officers. "He is to be held pending formal charges." As the security officers moved to flank him, Dr. Zephyr seemed to age before their eyes. The arrogant physician who had entered the surgical bay was gone, replaced by a broken figure who finally understood the price of his cruelty. "Your Majesty," he whispered, as the officers took his arms, "please, my family, they depend on my income. They had nothing to do with..." "Your family should have taught you compassion," Emperor Lysander replied without warmth. "Perhaps this lesson will benefit future generations." As Dr. Zephyr was led away in disgrace, a profound quiet settled over the surgical bay. The other medical staff stood in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed, the complete destruction of a man who had forgotten that healing was supposed to be about serving others, not serving oneself. In the aftermath of Dr. Zephyr's removal, the surgical bay felt different, as if an oppressive weight had been lifted from the very air. The remaining medical staff looked at each other with a mixture of relief and uncertainty, unsure how to process the dramatic reversal of fortune they had just witnessed. Emperor Lysander turned his attention to Mira, who was quietly checking the medical readouts to ensure his healing process had been completed successfully. Despite having just saved the life of the most powerful man in the galaxy, she continued to focus on her patient care duties, with the same dedication she had shown to every vagrant and refugee who had passed through the station. "Nurse Mira," the Emperor said gently, "I believe we need to discuss your future." She looked up from the diagnostic display, her amber eyes reflecting both exhaustion and apprehension. "Your Majesty, I understand if the station needs to terminate my employment. I disobeyed direct orders from a superior officer and..." "You saved my life," Lysander interrupted. "More than that, you demonstrated the kind of moral courage that has become all too rare in our galaxy. The question isn't whether you'll be terminated, it's whether you'll accept a promotion." The other staff members exchanged glances of amazement. Dr. Sarah Chen, a human physician who had worked alongside Mira for 2 years, stepped forward tentatively. "Your Majesty, if I may, Nurse Mira is the finest medical professional I've ever worked with. Her diagnostic skills are extraordinary, and her dedication to patient care is absolute." "I've seen that firsthand," the Emperor replied, "which is why I'm offering her the position of Chief Medical Officer of this station, effective immediately." Mira felt her knees go weak. From outcast nurse to chief administrator in the span of a single day, it was almost too much to comprehend. "Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for such a position. I don't have the administrative experience or..." "You have something far more valuable," Lysander said firmly. "You have the heart of a true healer. Administrative skills can be learned. Compassion cannot be taught." He gestured around the surgical bay. "This facility needs someone who will make decisions based on medical necessity and humanitarian principles, not political connections or profit margins." Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "The nursing staff already look up to you, Mira, and after what we just witnessed, I think you'll find that the medical staff will support you completely." One of the junior doctors, a young Andromedan named Kess, stepped forward nervously. Chief Medical Officer Mira, there's something you should know." Dr. Zephyr has been systematically denying care to what he called undesirable patients for months. We have documentation of dozens of cases where people died because he refused to authorize treatment. The revelation hit the room like a shockwave. Emperor Lysander's expression darkened as the full scope of the former doctor's crimes became apparent. How many died? Dr. Kess consulted his tablet with shaking hands. 47 confirmed deaths in the past 6 months alone, Your Majesty. Refugees, indigent humans, members of what Dr. Zephyr considered inferior species. All denied care based on his resource allocation protocols. Mira felt the dragon fire stir within her, not the gentle healing flame she had used on the Emperor, but the righteous fury that had once driven her ancestors to protect the innocent against those who would do them harm. 47 lives, she whispered, her voice carrying harmonics that made the medical equipment resonate in sympathy. 47 souls who died because one man decided they weren't worth saving. Their deaths will not be in vain, Emperor Lysander declared. Chief Medical Officer Mira, your first directive is to implement new protocols, ensuring that every patient who enters this facility receives care based solely on medical need. No exceptions, no discrimination, no resource allocation based on ability to pay. Mira straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of her new responsibility settling around her like a mantle. It will be done, Your Majesty. But I'll need to restructure the entire administrative system. Dr. Zephyr's protocols were deeply embedded in our daily operations. You'll have whatever resources you need, the Emperor promised. I'm authorizing an emergency budget increase of 300% for this facility. Money will never again be a factor in life or death decisions. Dr. Chen stepped forward with a suggestion. Mira, what if we established a memorial ward, something to honor those who died under the previous administration, and to serve as a reminder of why we do this work? The new chief medical officer nodded thoughtfully. The compassion ward, she said, a place where the most vulnerable patients receive the highest level of care, regardless of their circumstances. We'll make sure that Dr. Zephyr's victims are remembered not as statistics, but as the precious lives they were. Emperor Lysander smiled for the first time since his arrival at the station. Spoken like someone who truly understands the value of every life, the galaxy needs more leaders like you, Chief Medical Officer. As the reality of her promotion began to sink in, Mira felt a profound sense of purpose settling into her bones. She thought of all the patients she had cared for in the lower wards, all the refugees and outcasts who had been turned away or given substandard care. Now she had the power to change that, to ensure that every person who came through their doors would be treated with dignity and compassion. There's one more thing, she said to the Emperor. I want to establish a training program for young medical professionals from underserved communities, people who understand what it means to struggle, who won't forget their roots when they gain the power to heal. An excellent proposal, Lysander agreed. The Keeper Dragon Medical Academy. How does that sound? Mira's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. To have her dragon heritage honored in such a way, to have it become a symbol of hope rather than shame, was more than she had ever dared to dream. 3 hours after Dr. Zephyr's dismissal, Mira found herself standing in what had been the former chief's office, a sterile, imposing space filled with awards, certificates, and holographic displays of his family's political connections. The room felt cold despite its advanced climate control, lacking any warmth or indication that healing had ever been its primary purpose. Emperor Lysander stood beside her, reviewing the administrative files they had discovered in Dr. Zephyr's personal database. Each document painted a clearer picture of systematic discrimination and calculated cruelty that went far beyond simple budget concerns. Look at this, the Emperor said grimly, highlighting a particular file on the holographic display. He maintained a secret classification system for incoming patients, green for priority treatment, wealthy merchants, government officials, anyone with political connections, yellow for standard care, middle-class citizens who could afford basic procedures, and red. Mira's amber eyes glowed with suppressed fury as she read the red classification criteria: refugees, indigent humans, members of genetically inferior species, anyone with visible disabilities, and, her heart clenched, hybrid abominations including dragon-blooded individuals. I was classified as red, she whispered, understanding now why Dr. Zephyr had been so consistently cruel in his treatment of her. He saw me as genetically inferior from the moment I arrived. His prejudices ran deeper than I initially realized, the Emperor admitted. his voice heavy with disgust. This wasn't just about money. It was about his belief that some lives were inherently worth less than others. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. "Mira, we've completed the initial review you requested. The casualty numbers are worse than we thought. 73 deaths in the past year, all involving patients classified as red priority. Samit, there's something else. We found evidence that Dr. Zephyr was selling medical supplies intended for emergency cases." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Not only had the former chief medical officer condemned the vulnerable to death through neglect, but he had been profiting from their suffering by selling the very supplies that might have saved their lives. "Where were those supplies being sold?" Mira asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Private clinics in the wealthy sectors," Dr. Chen replied. "Facilities that catered exclusively to the elite. He was essentially stealing medicine from the poor to ensure the rich had access to premium care." Emperor Lysander closed his eyes, struggling to control his rage. In his decades of leadership, he had encountered corruption and cruelty in many forms, but there was something particularly vile about a healer who had perverted his oath so completely. "Your Majesty," Mira said quietly, "with your permission, I'd like to hold a memorial service for Dr. Zephyr's victims. Their families deserve to know that their deaths mattered, that they weren't just forgotten statistics." "Of course," the Emperor replied. "But first, we need to ensure that the current patients receive proper care. How many are currently classified as red under the old system?" Mira accessed the patient database, her scaled fingers moving swiftly across the holographic controls. 37 patients currently in the facility, including... She paused, her expression growing troubled. "Including the man who was in bed 7 when I first met you. He's been requesting pain medication for 3 days, but Dr. Zephyr classified him as terminal vagrant, palliative care only." "What's his actual condition?" the Emperor asked. "Treatable infection that's been allowed to progress to critical levels," Mira replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "With proper antibiotic treatment and surgical intervention, he could be completely healed within a week. Instead, Dr. Zephyr sentenced him to die slowly because he couldn't afford advanced care." Without hesitation, Mira headed for the door. "I need to see him immediately. And every other red classified patient in this facility. We're going to reverse every single one of Dr. Zephyr's death sentences." As they made their way through the corridors toward the lower wards, Emperor Lysander observed how the staff responded to Mira's presence. Where they had once hurried past Dr. Zephyr with downcast eyes, they now approached their new chief medical officer with hope and respect. Several nurses and junior doctors fell into step behind them, eager to participate in what felt like a healing revolution. The lower ward was a stark contrast to the gleaming upper levels where wealthy patients received care. The lighting was dimmer, the equipment older, and the overall atmosphere spoke of a place where people were sent to die quietly rather than to be healed. But as Mira entered with her entourage, something fundamental began to change. "Transfer every patient in this ward to the premium care levels," she announced to the shocked nursing staff. "I want full diagnostic workups, the best available treatments, and round-the-clock monitoring. No one dies on my watch because they can't afford proper medical care." The head nurse, an elderly Centaurian named Veltar, stared at Mira with tears streaming down her weathered face. "Chief Medical Officer, we've been requesting those transfers for months. Doctor, Zephyr always said there wasn't room in the upper wards." "There's room now," Mira replied firmly, "and there always will be, as long as I'm in charge of this facility." As the staff began the process of moving patients, Emperor Lysander pulled Mira aside. "You understand that this level of care will be expensive. Even with the budget increase I authorized, providing premium treatment to everyone will strain resources." Mira's amber eyes met his with unwavering determination. "Your Majesty, with respect, some things are more important than money. Every being in this facility deserves the best care we can provide. If we run out of funds, we'll find more. If we need better equipment, we'll acquire it. But we will never again decide who lives and dies based on their bank account." The Emperor smiled, recognizing in her words the same conviction that had driven the greatest leaders throughout galactic history. "How you sound like someone ready to change the entire medical system." "Maybe I am," Mira replied, her dragon heritage filling her voice with quiet power. "Someone has to." The transformation of Nexus Medical Station began immediately. Within hours of Mira's appointment as Chief Medical Officer, the sterile hierarchy that had defined the facility under Dr. Zephyr's rule started to crumble. In its place, something remarkable emerged, A medical community united by the simple principle that every life had equal value. Mira stood in the newly designated compassion ward, watching as her staff worked with renewed purpose. The man from bed 7, whose name she had learned was Marcus Chen, a former Federation naval engineer whose service injuries had left him unable to afford private medical care, was already showing dramatic improvement after proper antibiotic treatment and surgical intervention. Chief Medical Officer, Marcus said weakly as Mira approached his bedside, "I wanted to thank you. I was ready to die, you know. After 3 days of being told there was nothing more they could do for me, I'd accepted it." Mira gently adjusted his IV line, her enhanced senses monitoring his recovery progress. "No one should have to accept unnecessary death, Marcus. Your service to the Federation earned you the right to proper medical care, but even without that service, you would have deserved treatment simply because you're a living being." Dr. Chen, the human physician, not the patient, appeared at Mira's elbow with a tablet displaying patient statistics. "The results from the first 12 hours are extraordinary," she reported. 7 patients who were classified as terminal under the old system are now showing significant improvement. The Andromedan refugee in room 12 has regained consciousness for the first time in weeks. "And the Vraxian child?" Mira asked, referring to a young patient whose family had been unable to afford the specialized treatment needed for a rare genetic condition. "Responding beautifully to the gene therapy we initiated," Dr. Chen replied with a smile. "Her parents are crying tears of joy in the waiting area. They'd been told to prepare for the worst." Emperor Lysander observed these interactions from a respectful distance, documenting everything he witnessed for his eventual report to the Federation Council. What he saw was more than improved medical outcomes. It was a fundamental shift in the culture of healing. Under Dr. Zephyr's rule, the medical staff had been demoralized, frightened, and constrained by arbitrary limitations. Under Mira's leadership, they were becoming the healers they had originally set out to be. "Your Majesty," Dr. Kess approached nervously, "we've received word that the Zentorian Medical Consortium is displeased with recent developments. Dr. Zephyr's family is demanding his immediate release and reinstatement." The Emperor's expression hardened. "Let them demand. Dr. Zephyr will face trial for his crimes, and the evidence against him is overwhelming. No political pressure will change that outcome." Mira looked up from her patient assessments, her amber eyes reflecting concern. "Your Majesty, I don't want my appointment to create political problems for the Federation. If the consortium withdraws their support, then we'll find better partners," Lysander interrupted firmly. "The consortium's behavior in this matter reveals their true priorities. Any medical organization that would defend systematic discrimination and medical negligence is not worthy of Federation support." As if summoned by their conversation, the communication system activated with an incoming priority transmission. The holographic display materialized in the center of the ward, showing the imperious figure of High Physician Zelthar, the Zentorian who led the medical consortium and was, not coincidentally, Dr. Zephyr's uncle. "Emperor Lysander," the High Physician's voice carried the arrogant tone that seemed to run in his family, "I demand to speak with you regarding the outrageous treatment of my nephew. He is a respected member of our medical community, and these charges against him are clearly politically motivated." "High Physician," the Emperor replied coldly, "your nephew condemned 73 patients to death through medical negligence and profited from selling supplies meant to save lives. The charges are based on documented evidence, not political motivation." Zelthar's 4 arms gestured dismissively. "Exaggerated claims from inferior species seeking compensation. My nephew followed established protocols for resource management. You cannot seriously intend to destroy his career over the complaints of refugees and genetic aberrants." The casual cruelty in the High Physician's words sent a wave of shock through the medical staff. Even they, accustomed to Dr. Zephyr's prejudices, were stunned by this open declaration that some lives were inherently worthless. Mira stepped into the holographic transmission's range, her dragon heritage beginning to manifest as her anger grew. "High Physician Zelthar, I am Chief Medical Officer Mira, and I want to be very clear about something. Every patient who died under your nephew's protocols was a precious life with dreams, families, and the same right to medical care as any wealthy Zentorian. Their species, economic status, or genetic heritage made them no less deserving of compassion." Zelthar's eyes widened as he took in Mira's scaled skin and glowing amber eyes. "A dragon hybrid. This is what the Emperor considers suitable leadership for a medical facility? This creature is not even pure-blooded. The insult hung in the air like poison, but before anyone else could respond, Marcus Chen struggled to sit up in his hospital bed. "That creature saved my life when your nephew was ready to let me die," he said, his voice growing stronger with indignation. "She's shown more medical ethics in one day than your entire family has in generations." Other patients began to speak up, their voices joining in a chorus of support for their new chief medical officer. The Andromedan refugee, the Vraxian child's parents, dozens of beings who had been dismissed as worthless under the old regime, all united in defense of the healer who had given them hope. "This is intolerable," Zelthar snarled, his composure cracking. "The consortium will not stand for this humiliation. We are withdrawing all support from Nexus Medical Station, effective immediately. Let's see how your compassionate policies work without proper funding or supply chains." Emperor Lysander stepped forward, his presence filling the transmission with imperial authority. "High Physician, you have just demonstrated exactly why the Federation needs new medical partners. Consider your organization's contracts with all Federation facilities terminated. We will find healers who actually understand the meaning of their oath." The transmission ended abruptly as Zelthar cut the connection in fury, leaving the ward in stunned silence. The staff looked at each other with a mixture of elation and concern. They had just witnessed their emperor declare war on one of the galaxy's most powerful medical organizations. "Your Majesty," Mira said quietly, "you've just made a very dangerous enemy for my sake." Lysander smiled, the expression transforming his weathered features. "No, Chief Medical Officer. I've just made a powerful ally for the cause of true healing. And I have a feeling that ally is going to change medical practice throughout the galaxy." In the days following the Zentorian Medical Consortium's withdrawal, Nexus Medical Station faced its greatest challenge yet. Supply deliveries stopped arriving, funding streams were cut off, and several staff members who had family connections to the consortium resigned under pressure. But rather than collapse under these pressures, something extraordinary happened. The galaxy began to respond. Mira stood in her office, which she had completely transformed from Dr. Zephyr's cold monument to Ego into a warm space filled with patient artwork, family photos of her staff, and holographic displays showing real-time patient recovery statistics. Before her, a stream of incoming communications told an incredible story of support from unexpected sources. Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Chen announced as she entered with a tablet full of messages, "We've received offers of assistance from over 300 independent medical facilities across the galaxy. They're calling it the Compassion Movement." Emperor Lysander, who had extended his stay to help navigate the political crisis, looked up from his own communications with interest. "What kind of assistance?" "Everything we need, and more," Mira replied, her amber eyes bright with amazement. "The Dragon's Heart Hospital on Pirothan Prime is donating their entire surplus of medical supplies. The Independent Healers Guild has offered to establish a permanent supply chain specifically for facilities that refuse to discriminate. And look at this." She activated a holographic message that showed an elderly human woman in simple medical scrubs. "Chief Medical Officer Mira, my name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I've been practicing medicine in the Outer Rim territories for 40 years. What you've done at Nexus Medical Station has inspired thousands of medical professionals who've been fighting this same battle in isolation. We want to join your movement." The message continued with Dr. Vasquez outlining a proposal for a new medical alliance, an organization of healers dedicated to the principle that quality medical care was a fundamental right, not a privilege to be bought and sold. "There are more," Dr. Chen continued excitedly. "A group of young medical students on Centauri Academy have started a petition demanding ethics reforms in medical education. 3 different pharmaceutical companies have offered to provide medications at cost rather than market prices. And," she paused, grinning, "the Healers Guild on Andromeda Prime wants to officially recognize dragon healing techniques as legitimate medical practice." Mira felt tears building in her eyes. For years she had hidden her dragon heritage, ashamed of abilities that others saw as primitive or unnatural. Now that same heritage was being celebrated as a symbol of true healing. "Your Majesty," she said to Emperor Lysander, "I have a request that goes far beyond this station." "Tell me," he replied, already sensing the scope of what she was about to propose. "I want to establish the Galactic Healing Accords, a new set of medical ethics standards that every Federation facility must follow. No discrimination based on species, economic status, or genetic heritage. No denial of care based on ability to pay. No classification of patients as worthy or unworthy of treatment. The Emperor nodded slowly, understanding the revolutionary implications of such a proposal. You're talking about restructuring the entire medical system. The resistance will be enormous. Then we'll overcome it the same way we overcame Dr. Zephyr, Mira replied with quiet determination, through compassion, courage, and proof that a better way is possible. Before the Emperor could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The emergency broadcast system activated, announcing an incoming disaster. All medical personnel to emergency stations. Massive transport accident in the Kepler system. Estimated 300 casualties inbound. Mira's training took over immediately. Dr. Chen, activate all emergency protocols. I want every available bed prepared for trauma patients. Contact our new supply partners. We'll need everything they can send us. Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Kess called from the communications station. The casualties include refugees from 12 different species. Under the old system, half of them would have been left to die. Mira finished grimly. Not anymore. Every single one of those patients gets the best care we can provide. Emperor Lysander watched as the medical station transformed into a hive of coordinated activity. Unlike the cold efficiency that had characterized Dr. Zephyr's administration, this was organized compassion. Dozens of medical professionals working together with shared purpose and genuine care for their patients. Your Majesty, Mira said as she prepared to head to the emergency bay, I may not get another chance to say this. Thank you for seeing value in me when others saw only a half-breed nurse. Thank you for giving me the power to make a difference. Mira, the Emperor replied using her first name for the first time since his recovery. You already had the power to make a difference. All I did was make sure others recognized it. The first wave of casualties began arriving, beings of every conceivable species, from the crystalline silicates whose bodies had shattered in the transport crash to the gaseous nebulans whose containment suits had been breached. Under Dr. Zephyr's system, medical staff would have been forced to triage based on species compatibility and economic factors. Under Mira's leadership, they triaged based purely on medical need. Silicate patient to surgical bay 1 will need the quantum reconstruction unit, Mira called out, her enhanced senses allowing her to assess multiple patients simultaneously. Nebulan containment breach in Bay 3, emergency atmospheric isolation. Human child with severe internal injuries to Trauma Center 5, prep for immediate surgery. Emperor Lysander found himself pressed into service as an orderly, helping to transport patients and coordinate with incoming medical supply ships. For someone who usually commanded from the bridge of a starship, working directly with the wounded, provided a perspective on leadership he had never experienced. Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Chen's voice carried over the controlled chaos. We have a problem. The Zentorian rescue ship refuses to transport mixed-species casualties. They're demanding we segregate the patients by genetic compatibility. Mira's eyes blazed with dragonfire as she looked up from the critical patient she was treating. Tell them that every patient on this station is under my personal protection. If they don't like our policies, they can find somewhere else to dock. The response that came back was swift and vicious. The rescue ship commander says he'll report your genetic advocacy policies to the medical consortium. He's recommending that all Zentorian medical facilities blacklist Nexus Medical Station. Let them, Mira replied, her hands never pausing in their delicate work of repairing damaged organs through dragon healing techniques. We have new allies now. Better allies. Allies who understand that healing knows no boundaries. As word of the station's response spread through the emergency network, something remarkable happened. Ships from a dozen different worlds began converging on the station, carrying not just medical supplies, but volunteer medical personnel eager to join the compassion movement. The galaxy's healers were rising up, and Nexus Medical Station had become the symbol of their rebellion against medical inequality. 2 weeks after the transport disaster, Nexus Medical Station had become the most famous medical facility in the galaxy, not for its advanced technology or prestigious staff, but for its unwavering commitment to treating every patient with equal dignity and care. The disaster response had saved all 300 casualties, a feat that would have been impossible under the old discriminatory system. Mira stood in the memorial garden she had established for Dr. Zephyr's victims, a peaceful space where 73 trees grew in honor of the lives lost to medical prejudice. Each tree bore a small plaque with the name and species of a patient who had died unnecessarily, transforming their memory from forgotten statistics into a living testament to the importance of compassionate care. The Galactic Council has unanimously approved the healing accords, Emperor Lysander announced as he joined her in the garden. Every Federation medical facility will be required to implement your non-discrimination protocols within 6 months. Mira touched the bark of a young Andromedan willow planted in memory of a refugee child who had died when Dr. Zephyr refused to authorize expensive but life-saving treatment. 73 lives it cost to learn this lesson. Their sacrifice won't be forgotten. Their sacrifice has already saved thousands more, the Emperor replied gently. The ripple effects of what you started here are spreading across the galaxy. Medical schools are revising their ethics curricula. Hospitals are removing economic barriers to care. Even the Zentorian Medical Consortium is facing internal revolts from their own physicians. Dr. Chen approached them with news that made Mira's dragon heritage surge with pride. Chief Medical Officer, we've just received confirmation that the Keeper Dragon Medical Academy has received its official charter from the Federation Education Authority. The first class of students will arrive next month. 200 young healers from every species in the Federation, all committed to compassionate medical practice. The academy had grown from a simple idea into something revolutionary, a medical school that would train healers not just in technical skills, but in the fundamental principle that every life deserved equal care and respect. Students would spend their first year working directly with underserved populations, ensuring they understood the real-world consequences of medical inequality. There's more, Dr. Chen continued, with barely contained excitement. The Dragon's Heart Hospital has announced they're establishing 5 new facilities based on our model. The Independent Healers Guild membership has tripled in the past 2 weeks, and the pharmaceutical companies that joined our supply alliance are reporting that providing medications at cost has actually increased their profits because of the volume increase. Emperor Lysander smiled at the irony. It seems that doing the right thing can also be economically sound. Perhaps that will convince the remaining holdouts. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority transmission. Mira activated the holographic display, expecting another message of support from the growing compassion movement. Instead, she found herself facing a figure she had hoped never to see again, Dr. Zephyr, transmitting from his detention cell. The former chief medical officer looked haggard, his pale blue skin bearing the pallor of someone who had spent weeks contemplating the ruins of his life. His 4 arms hung listlessly at his sides as he spoke in a voice drained of its former arrogance. Chief Medical Officer Mira, he began, the title clearly painful for him to acknowledge. I am calling to offer my testimony regarding the systematic discrimination that occurred under my administration. I have documented evidence of other facilities throughout the consortium that employ similar practices. The offer was unexpected, and Mira found herself studying the broken figure on the screen with something approaching pity. Dr. Zephyr, why would you help expose your own allies? Because, he replied with visible effort, I have had time to think about what I became, about the lives I destroyed through my prejudice and arrogance. I cannot undo the harm I caused, but perhaps I can prevent others from following the same path. It was a remarkable admission from someone who had once considered entire species to be genetically inferior. Emperor Lysander stepped into view of the transmission. Dr. Zephyr, your cooperation would significantly accelerate our investigation of discriminatory medical practices. In exchange, the prosecution would consider a reduced sentence. I don't want a reduced sentence, Your Majesty, Dr. Zephyr said quietly. I want to serve my full punishment as a reminder of what happens when healers forget their purpose. But I do want my testimony to matter. I want the evidence I can provide to help Chief Medical Officer Mira save lives. After the transmission ended, Mira stood in contemplative silence. The transformation of her former tormentor, from arrogant oppressor to repentant ally, illustrated the power of consequences, combined with genuine reflection. Do you believe his change of heart is genuine? The Emperor asked. His motivations matter less than his information, Mira replied pragmatically. If his testimony helps us expose other facilities that are denying care based on prejudice, then his redemption serves a purpose beyond personal absolution. Dr. Chen returned with a tablet, displaying the latest statistics from facilities that had already implemented the healing accords. The results are extraordinary, Mira. Patient survival rates are up across all demographics, staff morale has improved dramatically, and the cost savings from preventive care and early intervention are offsetting the initial expense increases. The success of the compassion movement had validated everything Mira had believed about medical practice. When healers focused on preserving life rather than preserving profit margins, everyone benefited: patients, medical professionals, and even the economic systems that supported healthcare. Chief Medical Officer, a young orderly, approached nervously. "There's someone here to see you. She says she's from the Zentorian resistance movement." Mira's eyes widened with surprise. She had heard rumors of Zentorian medical professionals who opposed their own consortium's discriminatory practices, but she had never expected to meet one directly. The visitor turned out to be a female Zentorian physician whose 4 arms bore the ritual scars of noble birth, but whose eyes held the compassion that Dr. Zephyr had never possessed. "Chief Medical Officer Mira, my name is Dr. Kelvara. I represent 300 Zentorian physicians who wish to formally request admission to your compassion movement." The request represented the ultimate vindication of everything Mira had fought for. Even within the species that had produced Dr. Zephyr, there were healers who understood that true medicine transcended politics, prejudice, and profit. 6 months after the transformation of Nexus Medical Station, Emperor Lysander stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the great chamber of the Federation capital. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the crystalline amphitheater, their attention focused on the remarkable figure at the center of the chamber, Chief Medical Officer Mira, whose dragon heritage now blazed openly as she addressed the galaxy's most powerful leaders. "Honored representatives," Mira began, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance that had become the signature of the compassion movement, "we gather today to formalize what has already become reality across the Federation. The principle that healing knows no boundaries of species, status, or wealth. The transformation she had triggered at a single medical station had spread like wildfire through the galaxy. The healing accords were now implemented at over 10,000 medical facilities. The Keeper Dragon Medical Academy had graduated its first class of healers, young professionals who carried Mira's vision of compassionate care to the furthest reaches of Federation space. "The statistical evidence is overwhelming," Mira continued, gesturing to holographic displays that showed improved health outcomes across all demographics. "When we eliminated discrimination from medical practice, mortality rates dropped by 37% galaxy-wide. When we removed economic barriers to care, long-term healthcare costs actually decreased because preventive treatment became accessible to everyone." In the observer gallery, Dr. Chen and the other staff from Nexus Medical Station watched with pride as their chief medical officer addressed the most important political body in known space. They had witnessed her evolution from an outcast nurse to a galactic leader, but her core values had never wavered. Every life deserved compassionate care, regardless of any other consideration. "But numbers, however impressive, tell only part of the story," Mira said, her amber eyes meeting the gaze of representatives from worlds that had initially resisted the healing accords. "The true measure of our success lies in the individual lives we've saved, the families we've kept together, and the hope we've restored to those who had been forgotten by the galaxy's medical systems." A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber, Marcus Chen, the former naval engineer, whose life had been saved during Emperor Lysander's incognito visit. He now served as a patient advocate at Nexus Medical Station, helping others navigate the medical system that had once nearly condemned him to death. "This is Marcus Chen," Mira explained to the assembled representatives. "Under the old system, he would have died because his military pension couldn't cover advanced medical treatments. Today he lives not just because we healed his body, but because we affirmed his worth as a sentient being deserving of care." The image shifted to show Dr. Kelvara, the Zentorian physician who had led the rebellion within the medical consortium. "This is Dr. Kelvara, who chose compassion over the prejudices of her own species. She now leads a network of reformed Zentorian facilities that provide equal care to all patients." Another image appeared. Dr. Zephyr in his new role as a medical ethics instructor at a reform facility, teaching young healers about the consequences of allowing prejudice to corrupt medical practice. His transformation from oppressor to educator had become a powerful symbol of redemption within the movement. Even those who once embodied the worst aspects of discriminatory medicine have found paths to redemption through service to others, Mira noted. True healing extends beyond physical ailments to include the moral injuries we inflict upon ourselves through cruelty and prejudice. Emperor Lysander rose from his seat among the representatives, his formal regalia marking him as the Federation's supreme leader, but his expression reflecting personal admiration for the woman who had saved not just his life, but his faith in the fundamental goodness of sentient beings. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," the Emperor declared, "I call for a formal vote on the proposal before us, the elevation of Chief Medical Officer Mira to the newly created position of Galactic Surgeon General, with authority to oversee medical ethics and standards throughout Federation space." The proposal represented an unprecedented expansion of medical authority, placing a former outcast nurse in one of the most powerful positions in the galaxy. Traditional political hierarchies would have made such an appointment impossible, but the success of the compassion movement had created new realities. "The candidate before us," the Emperor continued, "has demonstrated that true leadership comes not from noble birth or political connections, but from the courage to do what is right, even when the cost is enormous." She risked her career, her freedom, and her life to save a patient she believed to be a vagrant. Her actions revealed not just my identity, but the identity of what the Federation aspires to be, a society where every life has value. The vote was called, and across the amphitheater, representatives from 1,000 worlds cast their ballots. Some voted out of political calculation, recognizing the popularity of the compassion movement. Others voted from personal experience, having witnessed the transformation of medical care on their own worlds. But many voted from simple recognition that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a leader who had proven that compassion could be the foundation of effective governance. When the results were announced, the chamber erupted in celebration. The vote was not unanimous. There were still those who clung to the old systems of privilege and discrimination, but the margin was overwhelming. Mira had been elevated from outcast to one of the most powerful medical authorities in galactic history. As the formal ceremony proceeded, with ancient words and traditional rituals that transformed a dragon hybrid nurse into a galactic surgeon general, Mira felt the weight of her new responsibilities settling around her like a mantle. She thought of the memorial garden at Nexus Medical Station, where 73 trees grew in memory of those who had died under the old system. Their sacrifice had purchased something precious, a galaxy where healers would be held accountable to the highest ethical standards. "Surgeon General Mira," the Emperor said as he placed the ceremonial crown of her new office upon her brow, a simple circlet of healing crystals that glowed with inner light. "Do you accept the responsibility to safeguard the health and dignity of every sentient being within Federation space?" "I do," Mira replied, her voice carrying across the chamber with the absolute conviction that had driven her from the beginning. "And I swear that no being will ever again be denied care based on their species, their wealth, or their social status. Healing belongs to all, and all belong to healing." The words became more than a personal oath. They became the foundation of a new era in galactic medicine, an era where the outcast had become the protector, and compassion had triumphed over cruelty. 5 years had passed since that fateful day when a dying vagrant arrived at Nexus Medical Station, and the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. Surgeon General Mira stood in her office aboard the Federation Medical Command ship Asclepius, reviewing reports from medical facilities across known space. The statistics told a story that would have been impossible to imagine under the old system. Universal healthcare had become not just an ideal, but a reality. Through the vast viewport, she could see the newest addition to the fleet, the Keeper's Promise, a massive hospital ship designed specifically to bring advanced medical care to the most remote and underserved regions of the galaxy. Its dragonfire-powered healing chambers could treat injuries and diseases that had once been considered incurable, while its open-door policy ensured that every patient received care, regardless of their circumstances. "Surgeon General, Dr. Chen announced as she entered the office, now wearing the insignia of Deputy Medical Director for the Federation. "The final statistics from the Outer Rim Health Initiative are in. We've achieved our goal of universal coverage 3 months ahead of schedule." Mira smiled, remembering the doubt and resistance they had faced when announcing the ambitious plan to bring quality medical care to every inhabited world in Federation space. Critics had claimed it was financially impossible, politically unworkable, and philosophically naive. Yet here they were, having proven that when healing became the priority rather than profit, seemingly impossible goals became achievable. "How is our former colleague doing?" Mira asked, referring to Dr. Zephyr, whose testimony had been instrumental in dismantling the discriminatory practices that had once plagued galactic medicine. "He graduated from the rehabilitation program last month," Dr. Chen reported. "He's requested assignment to the charity clinic on Proxima 7, treating refugees and outcasts exclusively. He says he wants to spend the rest of his career serving the people he once considered beneath his notice." The transformation of her former tormentor had become one of the most powerful symbols of the movement Mira had started. When even the architects of medical discrimination could learn compassion, it proved that no one was beyond redemption. A soft chime announced an incoming priority transmission from Emperor Lysander, who was now nearing the end of his second term as Federation leader. His image appeared in the holographic display, showing a man who looked younger despite the passing years. The burden of leadership lightened by the knowledge that his empire had become a beacon of hope rather than just political power. "Surgeon General Mira," the Emperor began formally, then smiled with genuine warmth. "Or should I say, the woman who taught an empire how to heal itself." "The healing was always there, Your Majesty," Mira replied. "It just needed someone willing to risk everything to let it flourish." "Which brings me to why I'm calling," Lysander continued. "The Federation Council has approved the establishment of the Compassion Memorial, a permanent monument to commemorate the transformation of galactic medicine. They want to place it on the site where it all began." Mira felt her heart swell with emotion. "Nexus Medical Station?" "The very same. The memorial will feature 73 healing fountains, one for each life lost under the old system. But more importantly, it will include the eternal flame of healing, a dragon fire beacon that will burn continuously as a reminder that compassionate care must never be extinguished." The symbolism was profound. Her dragon heritage, once a source of shame and discrimination, would become a permanent symbol of hope for healers throughout the galaxy. The fire that flowed through her bloodline would inspire future generations of medical professionals to choose compassion over convenience, courage over conformity. "There's one more thing," the Emperor added. "The Council wants you to light the flame personally, using your own dragon fire. They're calling it the greatest honor in modern medical history." Before Mira could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command ship. Not the sharp emergency tones that indicated immediate danger, but the melodious chimes that announced arrivals of special significance. Through the viewport, she could see a massive convoy of ships approaching, vessels from every corner of the galaxy, carrying delegates who had come to witness the dedication of the memorial. "It seems word of the ceremony has spread," Dr. Chen observed with amusement. "The communications department reports that over 10,000 ships have requested permission to attend. Medical professionals, former patients, families of those we've saved, everyone wants to be here." Mira felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what her simple act of defiance had created. A single decision to save one life had sparked a revolution that transformed the moral foundations of an entire civilization. 3 days later, Mira stood before the completed Compassion Memorial on the grounds of what was now called the Mira Healing Campus, the expanded complex that had grown around the original Nexus Medical Station. The memorial was breathtaking. 73 fountains arranged in a perfect spiral, their healing waters flowing continuously to represent the lives that would be saved by the new medical ethics. At the center stood the eternal flame brazier, waiting for the dragon fire that would ignite it. Emperor Lysander addressed the assembled crowd of millions, both present and watching via holographic transmission across the galaxy. 5 years ago, a nurse with dragon blood chose courage over compliance. She risked everything to save a life she thought belonged to a vagrant, unknowing that her patient was the Emperor himself. But her true greatness lies not in whom she saved, but in why she saved him, because every life deserves compassionate care. Marcus Chen, now serving as Director of Patient Advocacy, stepped forward to speak for all those whose lives had been transformed by the movement. Surgeon General Mira didn't just save individual patients, she saved the soul of medicine itself. She reminded us that healing is not a business transaction, but a sacred trust between those who suffer and those who have the power to ease that suffering. Dr. Kelvara, representing the reformed Zentorian medical community, added her voice. She taught us that true nobility comes not from the circumstances of one's birth, but from the choices one makes when faced with others' pain. She showed us that the greatest strength lies in service to those who have no power to reward that service. Finally, it was time for Mira to light the eternal flame. She approached the brazier, with hands that glowed with the golden dragon fire that had started it all, the same healing energy that had saved Emperor Lysander and sparked a galactic revolution. As she extended her palms toward the brazier, the dragon fire leaped forth with unprecedented intensity, igniting a flame that burned not just with light and heat, but with the very essence of compassion itself. The flame roared to life, visible from orbit and broadcasting its light across the star system. But more than its physical radiance, the eternal flame carried a message that resonated through the quantum fields that connected all living things, that healing was possible, that compassion could triumph over cruelty, and that even the most humble among us could change the course of history through acts of selfless courage. As the crowd erupted in celebration, Mira felt the presence of the 73 who had died under the old system. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. It had purchased something precious beyond measure, a galaxy where every being could receive healing care simply because they lived and breathed and hoped. The eternal flame burned brighter, and across the galaxy, in hospitals and clinics and medical schools, other flames kindled in response, the fires of compassion that would burn in the hearts of healers for generations to come. The dragon nurse, who had once been dismissed as a half-breed aberration, had become the beacon that guided an entire civilization toward its better angels, and the flame she had ignited would never be extinguished, for it burned with the most powerful force in the universe, the recognition that every life, regardless of species or status or circumstance, possessed infinite and irreplaceable value. In the end, that was the true miracle. Not that she had saved an emperor, but that she had taught an empire to save itself.